Coming to you from a portable microphone, this is Don't Get Me Started. This is a conversation about advertising. And here is your host, freelance creative director and creative circus department head, Dan Balser.
Yes, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I am back in the library with alumnus Jimmie Blount and Baird from Preacher, as you know. And, sometimes I wonder, am I talking to the people who were in the room and got to hear these guys speak? I'm assuming that most of you who are listening in didn't have the privileges of seeing the work and experiencing this forum that was inspiring and entertaining. And I'm excited to have this conversation. I'm recording this part right now before we've had the conversation. Sometimes you'll hear an intro where I've gone and I've recorded it and I'll go back in and I'll do a clean intro. This one is live. They're sitting right here with me wondering what the fuck did I just get into. And I don't know how it's going to go, but if the forum and the vibe and the sort of aura of open sharing is any indication, I think we're in for a lively chat. If you're not familiar with Preacher, which I think is probably likely for many people, it's only 3 years old. I mean, how many toddlers do you guys know? They're down in Austin, Texas, and some amazing work for Squarespace. We'll probably talk a little bit about some of the other work, but I had seen some of the work for Squarespace, and I'd seen some of the work they've done. You guys have all seen. Check out the website before we start, preacher.co. Now go right now, type it in. I'll wait. Come back after you check out the website, so you're going to be informed, all right? All right, welcome back. Thank you so much for pausing and checking out Preacher.co. I appreciate your doing that. I have a sense that you fucking didn't do it. Rob, who is founder and chief creative officer at Preacher, started off at UT Austin in the advertising program. I will say I'm familiar with maybe two really strong undergrad programs. UT Austin is one of them. Colorado is another. I'm sure there are others. The people that I've known that have come out of the Austin program are stellar. Started off at BBH in New York, was there for a little over a year before he went to Arnold Worldwide in Boston, and then he was an art director at Fallon for a year before moving on to TBWA Worldwide in New York. He was there for a little over a year. I'd say the big chunk of the career was at Mother, 9 years and 9 months at Mother before starting Preacher back in January of 2014. Was that accurate?
That was accurate.
All right, cool. Folks, keep your LinkedIn up to date, because one day when you guys are a guest on this program, that's how I'm going to learn everything about you. You could. There's a button you just export to PDF, and the whole thing just comes right out.
I feel like my North Carolina time got left out, but that's all right.
What happened in North Carolina?
I guess that.
Where's North Carolina?
I'm not good at LinkedIn.
Talk to me about North Carolina. Where's North Carolina missing from here?
It was my first job out of school.
So what was that?
It was a little boutique agency called Weston Vaughn, and it was a good, I think, lesson that I've shared to students in the past, because I thought I was going to be some hot shit and had to get myself to New York or LA, and this agency from North Carolina that I'd never heard of came calling, and they were the quickest to get serious about offering me a job. And after my dream of being at Wieden & Kennedy Portland didn't come true, my dad said, I think you should at least call them back, since they're the only ones calling you. And I said, fair point, Dad. And so I did, and they were lovely people, and they flew me out to meet them. And then I stumbled into this boutique, and I see the work on the walls, and I meet the creative director who's worked at Wieden & Kennedy and worked at Fallon and worked for Ralph Ammirati, one of the hardest core art directors ever. Yeah. And it went from, man, I guess I'll go to North Carolina and show these guys what's up, till I go to New York and realize, please let me come back here.
That's so cool.
Tomorrow. Yeah, so very important to not necessarily focus on the name on the door and see who's behind it. It was a very lucky stumble.
I want to talk about that afterward. Speaking of North Carolina, Jimmie Blount started out in North Carolina as well. Jimmie is a senior art director at Preacher, went to the Creative Circus, graduated from Creative Circus sometime in the past. What year was that?
2012.
2012.
Yep.
Went directly to work for David Baldwin at Baldwin and has been at Preacher for just a few months. I'm going to say by the time you hear this, it'll be a little over half a year. Welcome back to the circus, man. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's surreal to be back here, and it's great to see you. It's insane to be on the other side of the forum podium and be up there. And it's also been funny to watch you just turn it on into podcast mode.
Right. Yeah. I just did that, didn't I?
Yeah.
See, because, all right, so here's the thing. So there's a student at school now, I'm not going to name his name, actually graduated, started his own podcast. you can't just start talking like you're talking. No one wants to listen to that. And I did one time with these 3 alumna, 3 women, and we had beers. And we recorded for like 45 minutes outside and on a patio, at a table on a patio with beers. And it was really fun conversation. And I went back to listen to it, and I'm like, this is not worth listening to. This was like, no one, you have to, when junior podcasters out there, keep something in mind. Every second that I'm having this conversation, I'm thinking about the person with the earbuds in right now. I'm constantly thinking about the fact that somebody's consuming this, someone's listening to this. And if we start to go off on a tangent and we kind of forget that there's that person in the room with us, then I think we lose them the minute that we start to disrespect the audience. And I know that I changed my voice rhythm a little bit because I want to respect the fact that someone's taking time out of their day to download and listen to this conversation. And it's part of that. You're familiar with Luke Sullivan, right?
Yep.
So when I did this with Luke, and I probably mentioned this on the show at one point, I was asking him a question, and he ducked his head down, he covered his face, and he looked away because I know he was perceiving the question as the listener would be perceiving the question.
Amazing.
Like, to know that this is actually something we're making in the moment. We're not just talking in the moment. And I don't say that to make any pressure or anything. It's just something that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. Sorry about the tangent. So that's a great place to start. I wanted to talk about that. So you have, because I'd say that a lot of the listeners are young, junior, possibly students. They have this vision of Wyden or New York. Talk to me about like the value of the not New York. Talk to me about the value of and I mentioned this on a recent show about kind of finding the shadows in the places where people haven't been. So what did you get out of that? And did you feel like you were not successful at that moment? And talk a little bit about that experience.
I didn't feel like I wasn't successful. I think I got very quickly humbled, and I don't think I was not humbled before, but I got really humbled at just how much I didn't know. You know, from maybe being one of the stronger folks, I hope, in my class to realizing this is a place I've never heard of, and I'm looking at layouts and lines and spot ideas and hearing the discussions in the meeting and realizing I am by far the least smart person in this room.
That's awesome, actually.
And so I think it just made me realize how vast this amazing landscape of creative talent is out there, and it made me feel like I now needed to go into what I called paid grad school, as in I'm getting paid to be here.
Right, that's great.
And I'm learning from folks, and I need to sponge it up, and I need to check everything I thought I knew and just listen to these folks. And I've thought about it a lot after starting Preacher, how lucky I was to end up in this little place in North Carolina I'd never heard of, and think, man, would I even be half the would I have the appreciation for craft, for stretching a dollar in production, for never letting there be an excuse that the piece isn't better because we didn't have blank. Because in North Carolina we had almost nothing,
right?
But we had a lot of inspiration around us and a lot of hustle and found a way to make interesting stuff. So I'm very, very grateful that ended up being my first job.
Were you humbled when you first met them, or were you humbled when you started working there, realizing like when did the realization come to you that like, hey man, wait a minute, this is maybe a really good place to start?
It was on the first day. It was literally on the first day.
That's cool.
Because I heard that I was going to be working on a Central Carolina bank newspaper ad. That doesn't sound like the dream until I saw the work that they were doing for Central Carolina Bank, and they were proudly showing that they'd just gotten a couple pieces in the one show in CA for Central Carolina Bank, and the discussion was around kerning and photography retouching and a ton of stuff that I knew nothing about, and realized that school number 2 was beginning.
All right, that's really, really cool. Do you have anything to add to that? Like, Sears is a little different because going to work for David Baldwin is a little bit like going to work for David Baldwin.
It's a lot like that, yeah.
My point is you're not going to a small state unknown agency working for people that aren't Wyden. I mean, David's a little different. So, what was the decision process about the first job? Because I frankly don't remember the specifics of any other offers that you might have had, but I remember you having a really strong book, and I remember David loving you. But when you got out of school, were there options, and why would you have decided to go there, or why did you decide to go there if there weren't any other options?
Yeah, there weren't really any other options. It was just something that happened really organically on Twitter. We got connected, and we hit it off. So I went up there and checked it out and had an interview, and I came back, and I remember talking to you and being like, so I got an offer from David Baldwin, and what do you think? And you were like, it's a no-brainer.
Right.
And you were like,
Well, because
take it.
I think David is a consummate teacher. I think he's a very patient friend and dad type guy. I don't mean it, David. I know you're not old enough to be a dad, or my dad, or Jimmie's dad. But there's a generosity to him, I think, and a demand of good work.
Absolutely. I think they raised me in a lot of ways to be like the creative I am right now. So, I mean, I owe a lot to David Baldwin and Baldwin and. So I just remember the first time I went there, I didn't really have other offers going on, but just it felt like the right fit. And I knew that I would probably do better at a smaller shop. It's probably why I did better at the circus than I did at University of Maryland. So I kind of just took that as like an insight about myself.
That's big. I think that's really important.
Yeah. So I think like the first job is hugely about fit. So I just had a really great opportunity there to work with him and all the other talented people that still are there. So
it's a really good point.
And I think a person like David is going to attract a lot of brilliant folks, not even just creatives. Like he is, you're right. He is such an amazing teacher, knowing him as a friend and someone that I've always looked up to. And it was funny, Jimmie showing some of his work in the forum. It made me, and seeing work that David had led, it made me go, man, we got to get better. Like there's some stuff, that is just like, oh my God, that's why I hired Jimmie, but also that's why I knew of Baldwin and knew I would love anyone that we were lucky enough to get from there because of that, making the most of every assignment. And I think that my first job in North Carolina with a guy called Robert Shaw West, like very similar to David in how much he cared about the craft, but also felt like it was kind of like this warm family leader. And so I think I learned early on the power of that in a small place. Yeah. And I remember him saying, as I was leaving to go to big New York and BBH, he's like, you're never going to love a job or have as much fun as you did here. And he wasn't saying it cocky. He was just like warning me, you're leaving something special. And he turned out to be very right for a long time until I found a place with a similar vibe.
I find that really interesting. I think, in my job as the department head here, there are a handful of creative directors who will consistently reach out to me to ask me specific questions about alumni or kids whose books they like. David's the one all the time. And he always wants to know about the character of the person. He wants to know what kind of person that person is, whether the book is really who they are, how do they, how are they with, and do they want to learn? I find that to be at least as inspiring and important as demanding good work, which I think is paramount.
Yeah,
but it's about character. So let's switch gears a little bit. Sure. You guys spent the morning generously looking at portfolios. What are you looking for in a modern current portfolio? I mean, these are the easy questions. I'm going to do the easy questions first. to kind of, I think a lot of the questions that the listeners also are curious to hear the answers to. Like, what are you looking for in books? What jumps out in a good way?
Well, just being a fan of the podcast and hearing other people kind of answer this a little bit.
Did I ask that question?
Well, I don't know if you've asked you before, but I've heard it. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe in other ways.
Okay.
But man, I just trashed your question.
No, there's a tangential question about the traits that you want in a young hire. Like one of the questions I ask a lot of creative directors is what's the best way for a new hire to endear themselves to you? So there's two questions. One is, what are you looking for in a book?
Yeah. And
the other is, once someone starts at day one, what's important to you when they're working there? So let's start with the portfolio.
Okay.
Like what
Yeah. So
Rob's nodding his head.
Yeah, it's a good start.
So I think a good book knows its audience and knows that it's going to like a creative or a creative director who has like is pressed for time. Mm-hmm. And I love to see print ads that have like solid art direction and like great lines, because that way I can quickly know how you think and how you execute. So that's the quickest way for me to understand kind of who you are creatively.
Where does a great line live in 2017?
It probably lives as a social post or on an end card of a TV spot, but we do print, and we just did a whole bunch of it for Knob Creek. So there is opportunities for that type of work. I know you always said while I was here that it's like the 100-meter dash at the combine, where it's something that you're judged on, but you're probably not going to do, but it really is like a great measure.
You need to get the job, yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And it's funny because just when you think everything's going to be social and digital, suddenly we're bombarded right now with script writing and out of home and print ads. And I'm like turning around to look at shelves to try to show people what I'm talking about and some old annuals and realizing we don't have any old annuals. We just have a bunch of graphic novels and graffiti books.
Right,
and so
right.
what are we going to do? And so I love, and I saw some of that today, I love still seeing classic print executions. And then beyond that, I think how a student can endear themselves, even through the interviewing process, is just showing optimism for the things that they don't know yet or want to know. Like I find that when I interview folks and you can tell they're just hungry to learn and do more, that's really the best thing, that they sort of realize, like we all do very quickly. I did on my first day, that you haven't figured it all out, but you've shown enough. Like you said, it's kind of like the combine, and it's like, okay, now let's put that to work. And so I think a real eagerness for just the good parts of this business versus coming in already with a bit of jade that you've learned somewhere. It can still be such a wonderful, fun career if you can find the right people to do it with.
It's also fun to see little pieces that are not ad-like objects.
Yeah.
So we saw a couple of those today, but those are just fun to see, like, what the hell is that thing? And I'm glad you made it, and I'm not really sure where that goes, but those are fun to see.
I just saw a campaign for Putin's cologne, and it's one of the most ridiculous and
Donald.
awesome things I've seen in a long time.
It's insane. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
But it's so perfectly stupid.
Yeah. Perfectly Stupid would definitely be like something I would like to strive for as a body of work.
That's pretty cool. So I think you kind of answered this next question, Rob, when we were talking about the first job. But now that you're sort of charged in a way, I suppose, with creating a culture and steering the ship, or right now it's a small yacht. It will be a ship. It's a nice yacht though. It's a really pretty yacht.
Thank you.
What have you picked up from other agency cultures? Because you've been at some very different style environments. What have you picked up that you know as red flags to avoid, and as some things that you want to emulate and recreate?
I think one of the things that I definitely want to emulate, and that we try to emulate, is just a spirit of resiliency. I think that's the one trait that all my favorite and best creative directors had, is when things inevitably change or go a little sideways or south or have to start over, they as leaders didn't put their heads in their hands. I can't believe this just happened. And that's a totally fair reaction to a lot of the things that happen in a normal day of advertising. But the ones that could feel your pain for a little bit and then help you get out of it and on to the next, sort of keeping that positive momentum, we tended to do the best work and get the most great work out. And so I would be lying if I didn't say there's some days that I find my head in my hands for a second, and then I try to remind myself that didn't help me, and that the best thing you can do is let's get back. It's hard, but man, when you look around the table and realize you have all these positive folks around you, I think that's the thing we're seeking most, is sort of positivity and optimism, because if you can get that around the table, the ideas will come.
Yeah. That's cool. All right, it's a weird question. All right, this may be a strange...
Definitely over to Jimmie for that.
This may be a strange question, but what excites you and what equally maybe bums you out about the state of advertising in 2017? What is it that sort of you're looking for? Now, I'm not asking about trends or where advertising's headed, but this is sort of, you're going to have another project come in right away, right? So what's exciting about that? First, let's just talk about what's exciting about advertising now. You've worked in all media over a decade, right?
Yeah, so I think the thing that excites me the most right now is feeling like
20 years what you've been doing this.
It's been 20 years. Right. Yeah, it's been 20 years. And so I think I feel excited that sort of the continual arguments that went on for the last 10 years about, digital and content and offline and online and new media, and it just feels like people rolled their sleeves up and just started making great work with it. I feel like maybe some of that debate is over, and people are just embracing that there's new ways to get things in front of folks, but that sort of craft that we maybe were all longing for and worried was going to go away can still be there.
Yeah, I hope so.
And I feel kind of inspired by that. Recently, I just find myself, when I look out at the world, seeing work that on any given day, the few minutes I get to open, Safari, I can find something like, oh my God, that's amazing. That makes me excited to get a Facebook post campaign. That makes me excited to
cool.
figure something out for Pinterest, which I still haven't figured out. I can't even pin. But like, we hired Jimmie based on one particular assignment where he got a discount barcode coupon assignment that was supposed to also be social. Sounds like the worst brief ever, and made a Krispy Kreme coupon with the barcode made out of the icing actually going live on Krispy Kreme donuts. I was like, that's the best thing I've seen in so long.
Right. It was. If you ever been to a Krispy Kreme, there's this machine that basically it's like a waterfall of sugar, and the donuts come rolling under it, and they actually created this waterfall to have gaps in it to create a scannable UPC code for discounts. It's pretty effing genius, dude. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, if somebody can make that out of what's basically like a digital coupon brief,
Did that
then there's
start-
hope for whatever we all have sitting on our desk.
Right?
Like,
Did that start as we have to show UPC, or did that start as we have to show donuts? Like, how did that start?
It started out as briefing as a coupon for the holidays of this holiday they created.
Right.
Day of the Dozens, December 12th.
That literally could be in the assignment you just try to knock out before lunch.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
even give it the love.
But it was one of the things where it was like, it's a coupon. Like, this is a coupon. And then we kept working on it, and we were like, is this an insert? What is this thing? And David's philosophy is like, everything's an opportunity. So we just felt like, how do we jujitsu this thing to figure out where is the opportunity? How does it lie? How are people using coupons now?
Right. That's cool.
And then I think we just got a little lucky. So
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. Getting a little lucky, getting it made.
Yeah.
And the client helping make it look good too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
All right, so let's switch gears again. Let's talk about you guys. Okay, how do you define? This is a philosophical. This is a heavier question.
That's cool.
Let's brace ourselves. How do you define success? What are you going for? Do you feel successful at this stage in your career? And if not, how do you define it?
I think we define success at Preacher as, are we seeing work get out into the world that we're proud of with enough regularity? I think we have a pretty high bar for the regularity, meaning people are hungry there. And it's interesting, when I say people, I don't mean the creatives, even though there may be mostly creatives listening. My two partners, Crystal and Seth, strategy and CEO, maybe get bummed faster than I do if they don't feel like there's enough inertia of work leaving the house, if there's not enough craft happening, if we left some stones unturned that we could have turned into an opportunity. Like
Keeps you honest.
Keep very honest. And it's interesting. I think where I define success is realizing every single person we have in our house right now is there because they want to make great work, regardless of their role. Because it's really interesting when you do reviews, when we do our employee reviews, and you sort of get the grades back on yourselves a bit and on the company, and you look at who's the most fired up, that we didn't make something more awesome, that we didn't get the kind of press we hoped for on something. It's quite often not a creative, which I just find really inspiring and interesting. Yeah.
Wow. What about for yourself personally? Like, do you feel a modicum of success at this point?
Not terribly. I feel really proud that hopefully we're on the right way when we come here and get to show a bunch of work to students from such diverse backgrounds and hear them all liking some or vibing on some of what you're doing. It gives you a little bit of a push that you're doing the right thing. But if I'm honest, I think we feel like we haven't even hit the tip of what we could do, and on any given day or not sure if anybody's even seeing what's happening.
That's interesting. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you feel like you're on the track?
I hope that wasn't depressing. Was that?
I didn't feel depressed by it. No, I thought it was inspiring.
Okay, cool.
No.
yeah. I think for me, for the advertising part of this question, it would be making things that I like. So I'm kind of like selfish in that way, where I want to like the things I'm working on. And a lot of times I hate after I've made it and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm like sick of this idea, or I can't, can't stand it. But if I can like something for a couple weeks after I made it, I think that's success. And then outside of that, probably success is just how well I treat the people around me. So my wife or my friends or my family and those things. So if I could go through a 12-hour day and then go home and make dinner and still be nice to everybody, kind to them all the way through it, then I feel like that was probably pretty successful.
That's good. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. All right, so Rob, 20 years in the business, right? So I'd say you're doing pretty well. What is it about you? What personal trait of yours? What is it about Rob Baird that has served you well, or the best? What personal trait of yours do you think has served you best?
Well, I definitely don't think I'm the most talented creative that you've had, even in the last 4 sessions probably on this podcast. So I think what's gotten me through is just a lot of optimism. I think if I had to be real with myself about why and it's very kind of you to say, if there's been some success, it's just every day kind of having optimism, not just in the whole company or a given project, even like the minutia of production or the minutia of the iterations, like optimistic that whatever we're getting thrown is going to somehow be for the right reason and we're going to end up in a better place. And I think that I think that got instilled in me in my very first job, and I think I tried to keep it with me everywhere I went. I think if I ever lost it a bit, it was when it led to me not doing my best work, or maybe feeling like this job isn't for me, and realizing that you can't rely on your bosses, the place, the names on the door to give you that. You have to bring that optimism, and if you can do that, you end up way more often than not making some really good work. And also, to Jimmie's point, not just the at home, but you end up treating the people around you really well, because you're putting out a positive vibe and kind of reminding ourselves that this is supposed to be a fun business. If it's going to be miserable, we should all be.
Optimism is also a setback anesthetic, right? So when setbacks happen, optimism will kind of lessens the pain of that in a way. It kind of makes that, it enables creatives, which I think is critical, to turn a setback into an opportunity. And I'll tell you that I did not have that as a young creative, as a junior creative. I was definitely did not have the optimism. I had anger at setbacks until I realized that, like, that's like, and I've said this 1,000 times, that's like being angry at the rain because you didn't have an umbrella. It's like, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So you need to realize that, like, that is part of the recipe. The recipe includes really awesome ingredients, and that's one of the ingredients that might not, when you're young, be awesome, but it just is. And that's a great answer. I don't think anyone's ever said that optimism, but I think optimism is a really great trait.
And by the way, we're totally cool if people need to get a little fired up for a minute or have some emotion. We definitely have some really great folks who, and I love it when they get fired up. But then it's time to put that on the side.
Get it out of your story. Get it out of your system. It doesn't help solve it the second time.
Exactly.
Any answer to that question while you're staring at the wall? And do you think there's something about you that has served you well so far?
I think I was just determined. Like, in undergrad, I really didn't know what I was studying or what I was doing, so I just became, like, determined to craft a skill, and the one I chose was art at that time. But even here, at the circus, I was kind of determined in the same way to, like, get off of my parents' paycheck, and to, like, earn my own. And then as I started to grow up and get out of the house and, get married and all those things, I just feel determined to get better and work harder. I don't feel like that's a great answer, but that's probably the answer.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so Rob, I think you answered this a little bit in the forum. Why start your own agency? Why would you give up where you were to have the risk of having your own shop?
It's interesting that you ask it that way, because you're right. There is a little bit of risk when you have a pretty nice situation. And I think not just for me, but for my other two partners, all of us were, at Mother together. We had a nice gig. We loved the people we were working with, the people we were working for. I still consider Mother family, and wasn't an easy decision, especially after almost a decade to leave that. So it certainly wasn't out of, like, frustration. I think maybe you just hit a point where, like anyone, you just need a new creative challenge. So I think for me personally, I felt like you'd always like to be doing better work, but just in the greater scheme of things, hadn't hit a new challenge I hadn't done before for a few years. I was just always trying to fill that piece of paper or that screen with the best thing you can at that given time. So then it was like, well, what else is there for me? Should I consider maybe going to the client side in a creative way? Maybe, but I love this business that we're in and the people that we're in it.
Because you get to be in all the clients' business.
Yeah, exactly. All the business. So,
I'm not saying all the business, which is also true. I'm saying all your clients' businesses. Now you're.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Which is the reason we love being in ad agencies, is because we become experts in our clients' industries.
Exactly right. Not
just one of them.
Exactly right. Yeah. And so I think at a certain point, having these two great co-conspirators, after a while, it started to feel like maybe the move is starting our own place. Not because we know better or have some new amazing model that no one's ever heard of, but just want to kind of keep doing what we're doing, getting to work on a really wide range of things, but do it ourselves and choose who and where we do it with.
What's been the most unexpected upside and most unexpected frustration?
the most unexpected upside, I think, particularly in moving to Austin, has been that there's such a rich and really open maker art, non-traditional creative community.
Very cool.
Where they really, it sounds like I'm just doing a brochure for Austin, but it's really true. They are so open and helping of each other with no expectation of anything else. So the way we were welcomed in, we were kind of a little paranoid. There's been a lot of people from the coast moving to Austin. How's this going to feel and be seen? The world doesn't need another ad agency, and neither does Austin.
Yeah.
And the sort of open arms of the art and design and creative community that may not even understand fully what exactly we do was so huge that suddenly we found ourselves inspired by people who may not know what a one-show annual or communication arts is, but man, does their work deserve to be in one. And we found ourselves, all of a sudden for me, it was like new inspiration, new connections to find interesting employees and people to help make us better and more surprising maybe in what we do. And we're still finding that today. And now that we're starting to get the luck to come to Creative Circus and hire people like Jimmie, now they get to draft off of this community relationship that's been built, and it just keeps becoming like a bigger and bigger swirl. So I think we didn't expect to have such a warm, open community there, and that has definitely made us a more interesting company than I think if we just started in a place we knew like New York.
How early did you guys care for, nurture, and create your own brand? The name, the look and feel, the black and white. How early was that in the process of your sort of launching and landing in Austin?
It was definitely before we got there, right. And it was the hardest creative project I've ever done.
Oh, for sure.
It's just like when you talk to people in a band and they, it's how they ended up with Foo Fighters because they just got tired of naming things
right.
and settled on that.
That's hilarious.
And so I feel like we went through that same pain. We knew what we wanted to stand for and be about. We knew we wanted to sort of have a little bit of New York hustle meeting Southern hospitality. We knew we wanted something a little Southern, but we really, sorry.
Because I actually believe that one of the reasons you're embraced is because of the brand.
Well, that's very nice of you to say. I hope that's true. We definitely put a lot of energy into it. And I will say that we were definitely hitting up against the wall. Had a few names that we thought were amazing that we couldn't legally have or something. You feel like, oh, it's back to that resilience and optimism, thinking we lost the one that was supposed to be us. We couldn't have it, and then suddenly just getting really honest with ourselves. What is it we do? We're messengers, and
right.
we're just trying to spread the good word for some people. So saying that not as a tagline out of frustration of why can't we name ourselves, and then realizing maybe that sounds right. Messenger's not that interesting, but let's type messenger into thesaurus.com and see what happens. Oh shit, preacher sounds amazing. That must be taken. It's not taken, and it kind of went from there, and then the brand kind of followed. But I think that would be an example of something we knew we wanted to do if we were going to have our own company, is let it hopefully feel like an open enough brand that people could come in and make it some of what they want it to be, and not let it get too pinned down.
And what's been a surprising frustration? Unless you don't want to talk about it because you're optimistic, and I have another question.
I'm optimistic, but I'm happy to be very real. I think one thing that's been a frustration is that it takes a little longer than we thought it would once we have space for new folks to find those family members and get them to Austin. It just takes longer. We were in New York for 20 years. You used to just being able to find some folks and they give notice, and 2 weeks later they're there in the Monday morning meeting. Yeah. It doesn't work like that. So there's times that we've definitely had to all pull extra weight and hours and grind while we wait on folks to arrive. So not complaining about that because it means we're getting people and we're growing, but it's definitely it's harder than we thought.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you another question about how Preacher works and sort of
Sure.
the flow and that kind of thing. And talk to me a little bit about working with artists, sort of being an agent for artists and enabling them. And is that something that you've always been interested in? Is that something that you had done in other agencies? Is that something that it just works perfectly with Austin, sort of like you're talking about the art culture? I
think it works really well in Austin, but I feel like I got a little bit of free training in that, working with Alex Bogusky and the folks at Crispin. Even though I was at Arnold, when we worked on the Truth account, I think that it was really cool the way they genuinely brought in artists and particularly street artists, because it made sense for that brand, but artists in general, musical artists, filmmaker artists, into that brand, and really trusted them and let them do what they do. It didn't ever feel like it was compromised. There was an art director that I used to pair up with on stuff called Alex Bernard, and I kind of watched how good he was with those artists and how genuinely he fought to keep that what they were doing pure and not let it get too bastardized. And certainly Brave Clients helped that too. So I think definitely that influenced how we do it a bit.
Cool.
And it's funny how we don't have to put this in the podcast, but you're talking about Don Shelford.
Yeah. We could talk about Don on the podcast. He's been on here.
Yeah, cool. I remember.
I mean, we're not going to say something bad. My rule on the podcast is we drop names all day long if it's good. I'm not going to mention someone's name if I got something bad to say about them. But Don Shelford, I mean, I can't imagine you're about to say something bad.
No, as good a dude and as big a talent as there is, and again, it's back to like learning from the people around you at every stage. I think Arnold was my third job in the business, and Don was one of the main creatives on Volkswagen, and that was another brand where they were really great. I think about working with musical artists and visual artists, and truly celebrating what they did. And Don is such a great soul of how he again fights and protects. I remember him fighting to protect Mike Mills' vision of a particular commercial and banking that away. Like, if I'm ever in that spot, I need to do that too.
That's
and I'm
really cool.
Certainly not saying I've been perfect at it, but you sort of learn from others around you who've maybe had more experience doing that, and then you can apply it to the rest of your career.
Jimmie, I love what you said, the question in forum when someone said, like, first of all, I love the fact, and I say the word love 100% facetiously, I love the way students ask the forum speakers how to do this job. Like, well, how do I come up with ideas? Like, how do I do this? It's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Why don't you just figure it out? But I loved your answer about like saving resources, inspiration, like that kind of stuff. Have you always been good about like saving illustrators you like, photographers, those kind of things? Hey, that's awesome.
No, I haven't.
Really?
No, I married a collector who has the biggest. We're in the library here at the Creative Circus, so we have something almost like this, and it's just in a bunch of Tupperwares because we just moved. But she is obsessed with having all different types of annuals and books, and working at Baldwin and sitting next to people like April Lauderdale, where she had these books and there would be all these different old cut, different line art, different illustrations. So those little resources are so valuable, and they're not on the internet. So like all of that stuff that I didn't know about, or even all old advertising annuals, like there's a whole bunch of stuff you can educate yourself on. So once I got with Kellen, my wife, and she's kind of my like art buyer in some ways. Where
that's really good. That's great.
It's awesome because I'll be like, Kellen, do you know about a photographer for like that shoots in this type of style? And she'll open up a Tupperware box and just pull out.
Oh my God.
This.
I think you guys should keep it in Tupperware. That's an amazing
that's
art
awesome.
storage.
Yeah, all those like all the mailers you get from photographers. Well, Kellen keeps them all, so like they're really in amazing. Tupperware. So like we can just flip through those, and it's not like thinking about, all right, what's that rep name, and then you're like browsing through their site and they don't have that thing. So I've become more and more of a collector because of her. So that's been helpful.
I had a partner once named Don Miller, who worked at Grayson Rothschild on like the original Land Rover stuff, and we would sit when we were concepting. We'd sit at a table like we're at and this table's scattered with crap. He would sit with a stack of stock photo books or photo books. The whole time that we're concepting, he would just be flipping through, looking at images, just visuals, just tone and context and contour and everything. It was always feeding his mind with and his design was always like, at first you'd look at his work, it's like, what the fuck is that? Like, why is it like that? Kind of got this orange tint to it. It was inventive because he was flooding himself with input all the time. And two things that happen, I think, is that it's the word director. People overlook the word director and art director. Isn't an art director supposed to be able to say, I want it to have this look and feel, and maybe you even know who that is. Maybe you have an art buyer to help you, but I think you should be able to think about, by exposing yourself to different styles. And also, I think it makes you more, the obvious one, makes you more inventive because you've got more water in the well to draw from. So I think that it was a great answer that you gave about like, Pinterest and going on design blogs and saving and looking, because that's not the answer to how to come up with ideas, but that's the answer to how to put fuel in the engine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
stay inspired. You don't know how you're going to weirdly mash those different things together and what's going to come out the other end. So if you're just feeding the monster with all types of different illustrations, designers, photographers, it's going to come out some
You didn't
way.
know when you were in school that someone's going to turn to you and say, well, who should we get to shoot this?
Yeah.
Right, that's going to happen.
I would have been like Kayla, because she killed it. She was the best one here.
Right, she was
awesome. Not the best, but she was one of the really good ones here. So
Okay, someone else is listening. She wasn't the best. She was very good.
yeah, she's very good.
So, all right, last question. So, Rob, knowing what you know now, if you could go back to 96, the day you graduated from UT Austin, what would you whisper in young Rob Baird's ear?
Oh man,
Knowing
that's a dagger question.
Knowing what you know now, what would you go back and tell yourself? That's the hardest question. Take your time.
I think knowing what I know now and just trying to remember how I was in 96 in that first job, I think I would have whispered in my ear to ask more questions and not be afraid to let people know you don't know. I was already kind of independently minded anyway, and so concerned with, especially once I realized I may not keep this job I thought I didn't want. I was so concerned with seeming like I was with it that I think I wish I had asked more questions more often, and it was well into my career that I realized, man, no one's ever going to judge you for that. They just want the fact that you're hungry, and actually their job, as to your point of creative director, is to direct the creative.
Right.
So not knowing everything or needing to ask for help is actually what that person's job is to do. And once I got that, man, my work started to get better and stronger and more interesting, versus holding myself away, stressing out at 4 a.m. with annuals strewn in the floor and banging my head and like, what am I doing? That was not the way to do it. And once I realized the power of just asking.
Right, there are more wells than the one. And I actually do judge people for asking questions. I actually judge them positively.
Yeah.
Ironically, I think.
Yeah.
So knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself, Jimmie?
Well, that's a great answer. I don't know. I would just want to build off Rob's and then I'll answer the question. But the kids or the juniors that endear themselves the most are the ones that are like, hey, how do I do this? And a lot of times I'll be like, I don't know. Like,
I just gave them a hard time for asking the question. That's kind of shitty of me to say. They're an idiot for asking and then saying that's so cool that they asked. But
yeah,
I'm sorry about that. I just did that, right? I'm an idiot. Oh, so stupid.
But I think this kind of asking is also a little bit different. This kind of asking is putting some real thought and work into it, and then realizing, I don't have the solution yet. Here's what I have so far. I think versus like, I got nothing. I think getting yourself halfway there.
Yeah.
And also like ask the question, like, you're not an idiot if you say, what's a rich banner? What does that mean exactly? Like, and if I didn't ask questions, I mean, I'm 50 years old with students who are half my age. And if they're talking about something, if I'm too embarrassed to ask about some cultural reference, then I cease to be effective.
Right.
And I don't care if you think I'm like, I know how old I am. So if someone says something to me and someone says something in a presentation, I don't understand what that reference, I'm going to ask them right away.
Yeah.
Explain that. And the thing is, I guarantee you every single time there's at least 2 students in the room who also didn't get the reference. But my point is, you have to ask the question. You're stupider for not asking.
Nodding in agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you tell yourself? I
I would say don't be so hard on myself. Don't beat yourself up. Yeah, I think I was. Maybe, well, if I didn't show, that's good.
Yeah, no.
But I feel like one of my first assignments, it was like we were launching like a new scent line for Good, which used to be a sub-brand of Burt's Bees. So it was aimed at a younger market. And I remember like thinking, oh my gosh, I have to crush this. And if it was a golf shot, it was like a complete duff and didn't even make it to the forward tees. Like, it was terrible. And I didn't like the work that I came out of it, but I was just like, that work could have never been good because I beat myself up so bad to make something awesome. And I put this unneeded pressure on myself, where if you just like trust yourself that you're going to be all right and you're going to do something good, then it'd probably be a lot better than putting all that extra stress on yourself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, the phenomenon when you leave, you're going to go to do something and you walk out of the room to the other room in your house and you forget why you got there?
Oh, for sure.
It happens all the time, right? Does it happen to you?
All the time.
So you know why that happens? So this is like our base DNA, like when we were cavemen, our survival from like prehistoric time, where when you walk out of a forest or into another environment, your brain is set to scan for danger. So it does like a soft reset. So anything you had in the forest is not relevant when you come out into that clearing because there's a danger there, and whatever you were thinking about then is not important. You have to survive. So when you go back to downstairs to get your keys, you forgot why you went downstairs because your brain has done that soft reset. So I had this question in my mind, and you answered so interestingly the other question that it just reset my brain. I couldn't find the other question. You took me into like the clearing when I was in a forest, and for that, at first I was frustrated, but now my optimism has turned that into a gift. So thank you for inspiring me with your whatever that answer was.
My pleasure. Oh man, I'm glad that could come full circle.
Right, listeners, thank you for sitting through this. And I'm trying. I've been doing this for a decade, and I appreciate your sticking with me. Please check out preacher.co. See the great work for Samsung. Great work for what's the golf client?
Golfsmith.
Golfsmith is such a great spot. Is that on the website?
Yeah.
So great, so honest, so against the grain, so unexpected. Really, really fun work. Check out preacher.co. The email addresses are really simple if you want to reach these guys. It's simply first name at preacher.co. So it's Rob at preacher.co and Jimmie at preacher.co. I'm at, as always, Dan's podcast at mac.com. Make sure you like the Facebook page. Should have said that at the top of the show. I'm feeling.
It's an advertising podcast. You didn't advertise.
Oh my God. Facebook.com/DGMS podcast. The podcast is also being featured on the One Club magazine page, which is really cool. Thank you to the One Club for that. Thank you, Julia Margolis. I think that's how you say her name, for doing the redesign of the homepage for the website. And thank you, Rob, so much. Great meeting you. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you for having us. Really cool.
This was pretty fun, I hope. I'm a little derailed. Jimmie, great seeing you.
It's been great to be back.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
Listeners, thank you for listening. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, start saving references.
Yeah.
Start being a collector. It's digital. It doesn't cost you anything. Or get some Tupperware. You know what? Save them, print them out, stick them in their Tupperware.
Didn't think about that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Listeners, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.